And I'll go into a bit about the frogs and toads, and so you know everything there is about frogs and toads, and maybe a little bored, but it's still interesting. And then their calls as well, which not as many people know. And so, why do we worry about the loss of the frogs and toads? And it's mostly because they're a great bioindicator. They live both on land and in water, and so they become exposed to a lot of pollution. They're highly vulnerable to it, and so around the world there have been declines in frog and toad populations. And so we've been keeping track of the Minnesota frogs and toads, especially since the mutations were seen a couple years back. That's when we really ratcheted up on watching the frogs and toad species. This is the basic life cycle, and tadpoles use a large amount of plankton and algae, and they store these nutrients which would otherwise be putting the wetland out of balance. The amphibians then emerge onto the land, taking these nutrients out of the ponds and bringing them to the upland environment, where they eat the insects and then are in turn eaten by birds, mammals, and fish, and so it's keeping the balance set. Amphibians, frogs, they lay their eggs in the water, and then they can have anywhere from 25,000 for the bullfrogs to, in the teens and 20s for the tree frogs, and they can lay them singly and in clumps, and basically attached to anything that's out in the water, especially some vertical strata like the vegetation. And they usually hatch within days. Particularly, the Great Plains frog is a species that will lay their eggs in a shallow temporal pool, and so because that may be gone very quick, they hatch the fastest in Minnesota. The tadpoles, when they emerge, have internal gills, and then they're primarily herbivorous. And so if you have kids that catch the tadpoles and you're trying to figure out what to feed them for those 2 weeks before they hatch, when make sure they have algae, plankton. They usually stay as a tadpole for about 2 weeks, but the bullfrog can last as a tadpole for 2 years or more. During metamorphosis, they lose their internal gills and tail and develop their limbs and lungs. The adults eat mostly invertebrates, and they're air breathers. And they don't exclusively live in water as adults, and many of them travel far from the water. So, especially like toads and some of those species, they really don't have an adult water cycle except when they're going back to lay their eggs. The species are broken up into the different types of forest, woodland, grassland species, and species of lakes and streams. And the forest and woodlands species emerge from the temporal ponds, and they feed on insects and live mostly on the forest floor. The grassland species, they have the highest drought tolerance, and then species from the lakes and streams, they live most of their adult life, even the adult life in the water. The tree frogs are the smallest. They can be less than an inch. This shows a northern leopard frog, but that's the size that most of our toads reach, the largest toads in Minnesota. And then the true frogs with the bullfrog is the largest at 8 inches here in Minnesota. In Minnesota, we have 14 species of frogs and toads, and they're broken down by toads, tree frogs, and then the true frogs. And I'll go through the toads, the skin of the toad is thick and dry, and this allows them to tolerate drought. They have the skin glands, they have secretions that make them unappetizing to most animals, and it can also irritate your eyes if you handle them and rub your eyes. They typically breed in shallow water and lay thousands of eggs, and the long strings are attached to vegetation. I have some sound effects too. This is the most common toad in Minnesota, and then other than during the spring mating, they can be found from pretty much anywhere. I'm sure you've seen them in your own backyards. And they have very few animals that eat them because of their skin, but snakes and raccoons will eat them. And I have the Canadian toad. It likes water more than most other toads. It's a prairie species, and it lives near the standing water and woodland edges, and they're active mostly at night. They tolerate the extreme heat and can remain dormant for several days, especially if there's a drought. And they overwinter communally in Mima mounds, and that can hold several hundred toads. They're also eaten by the hognose snake, raccoons, and skunks, although they have, again, the gland that makes them very distasteful. The Great Plains toad. They're more sharply marked than the American toad, and they prefer grasslands and agriculture fields. It's a farmer's friend because they eat the cutworms and other crop pests, and they're adapted to the driest conditions. They mainly hunt at night, and then when threatened, they take a breath and puff them up so they look bigger than what they really are. They're also eaten by the snakes, raccoons, and skunks. The tree frogs, we have the gray tree frog, Cope's gray tree frog, northern cricket frog, and spring peeper, and then the western chorus or boreal forest frogs. The tree frogs are much smaller than the toads or the true frogs, and they're about 1 to 2 inches long for most of them. All tree frogs have the toe pads. The species with the large toe pads can climb the trees to feed, and they lay their eggs either singly or in small clusters. And many of the species overwinter in the leaf litter or under rocks, and they can withstand freezing temperatures by having a sort of antifreeze in their veins, and their liver converts glycogen to glucose, which is then pumped into the frog's organs, preventing the ice formation. So the first one is the gray tree frog. This would be easier if my little button worked, but it's associated with woodland habitats, and it's often seen near the swamps. They're gray to creamy white, but they can change color slightly, so it can be anything from mottled grayish, so you can't really go by the color for these ones. They're small and with the toe pads that enable them to climb the trees, and they're often found hanging on your window. This is the one over there. Next is the Cope's tree frog. Notice how they're all sounding different. it's a lot tougher when you put them all together and then you're expected to try to figure out which one's which. The Cope's gray tree frog, it closely resembles the gray frog, and you can only distinguish them in the field by their call. And so that's why it's very important to learn those when you're doing the survey. They have large adhesive pads on the fingers and toes that enable them to climb the vegetation, and they live in a variety of habitats, even in the urban areas. And they also have the skin secretions that may be irritating. Northern cricket frog. Many of you might have heard of this one because it is it's widespread throughout the central and southeastern United States, but only in Minnesota it's found in some of the smaller pockets. We just recently had a new sighting of it as well. And so we found them during the survey, and the life expectancy of the northern tree frog is about 4 months, with only 5% of the population surviving the winter. And so it has a tough time going. They do sound like some of the birds in the habitats, and so a lot of times people will call in and say they don't hear as many frogs and toads, but when you start playing some of the sounds that they could hear for the frogs and toads, they realize that there are a lot more species out there. Spring peeper, this one most everyone I'm sure has heard. They're one of the earliest ones out. Typical frog sound. They inhabit the forested areas, especially areas with the brushy undergrowth, and they breed in fishless temporary wetlands associated with the forest habitat. So basically any sort of little pond that's in the forest, that's where they generally breed. And then they're one that can be frozen in the wintertime because they stay under the leaf litter. And the forest frog lives in a variety of habitats, including shallow wetlands and farm fields in the woodlands. And they're the smallest frogs. This is the one that was under an inch long. And they're sometimes described as two different species. The true frogs, which include the bullfrog, green frog, leaf frog, northern leopard frog, pickerel frog, and wood frog. This is a large group of long-legged, narrow-waisted, and smooth-skinned frogs. Push that one forward too fast. Adults are typically larger than the toads and the tree frogs. The bullfrog is the largest. Like I said, that one's 8 inches long, and the rest are only about 2-3 inches long. And the difference between these and the other frogs is their fingers are not webbed, although their toes might be joined by webs. Many of the species lay eggs in the film on the surface of the water, while others lay them in large clumps of vegetation. And most of these frogs, they overwinter in oxygenated lakes and streams rather than getting frozen. The first one would be bullfrog. It's the largest American frog, and it's highly aquatic. This one's also quite invasive. If you see the map over here, they're really only supposed to be here, but they've been found in quite a few other locations, and the survey helps us spot new locations that they're found. We think that they've been spread partially by people taking them with them, for eggs, or by universities and research centers, because most of those spots are around urban areas. And so it's people spreading them around. And these are a pretty tough one because they eat other frogs, and they're one of the tougher frog out there. And so when they come into a lake or a habitat, they really just kind of take over, which is why they're such a problem. The green frog. They're the second largest frog in Minnesota, and some of them are actually brown or bronze, so it's not, you can't necessarily tell them by the color. The males set up territory, and most of them overwinter as tadpoles, and then they develop as frogs in the springtime. They eat insects and worms and some small fish and frogs as well. And they usually don't chase their prey, they just kind of sit there and wait and then capture their prey as they come through. The mink frog. It's among the most common species in Minnesota, and they often spend time on the lily pads. And some of the tadpoles turn into frogs after about 3 months, others may overwinter. And their name comes from the musky odor that their skin produces. The round spot behind the eye is the tympanum, or eardrum, and it's obviously used for hearing. And it's the specialized patch of tissue vibrates when the sound waves hit it. It was once one of the most widespread frogs in North America, but since the 60s, its population in Minnesota and the rest of the U.S. has declined. Although since we've been doing the survey, we really don't see much of a trend line in decline for the leopard frog. The red leg disease, pollution, pesticides, and the loss of wetlands were the main reasons for its decline. They're also one of the ones that's harvested for bait, and for that they need a permit now, so some of that helps out. Pickerel frog. They're similar to the northern leopard frog, but they have spots located along the back and are paired and rectangular, not the rounded frog that you have just seen. They protect itself from predators by giving off a poisonous chemical, and this chemical can be irritating to humans and even kill captive animals if you put them together. So particularly for rehabbers or any of the sort that capture animals. The wood frog. They live in the forested areas but breed in the wetlands. And they're often one of the first species heard in the ponds, and they actually come out before the ice is gone. And so they're one of the only frogs that are found north of the Arctic Circle. And they spend their winters burrowed in leaves that fell in the previous fall. And they stop breathing, their hearts stop beating, the ice crystals form within their hibernating bodies, and then they produce the special antifreeze. Their eggs also have the antifreeze in them as well, since they are one of the earliest ones in being here in Minnesota, tends to refreeze after we get that first little warm up. For the frog and toad survey, which is what I manage, the volunteers, we direct them to the website, so I don't know if any of you have participated or know anyone who participates in it. But we've done this annually, and it began in 1993 in Minnesota, and then in 1996 we joined up with the larger group run by the USGS called the North American Monitoring, North American Amphibian Monitoring Program, NAM for short. And it's an all-volunteer survey, and so I just coordinate the about 250 people that run the routes. And the standards were developed under the NAP program, and so it's participated through this program in the United States, Canada, and Mexico, maybe also participating. The routes, when you go to our site, there's a link through, and then you can get to the USGS site and then find out which routes are open and which ones are closed. So especially if you live in the Twin Cities, you're generally out of luck. You have to basically stay in the program for several years to work your way down. But if you have cabins or anything else, people usually do it that way. Or I have some volunteers who pick a new route every year and they just travel around the state and make it an excuse for going throughout the state. The routes look like this, and you go out on 3 evenings after dark, and there are 10 stops in each route, and the routes were randomly drawn, but the route stops were created by the first volunteers, and they were supposed to be at least a mile apart along the route. And so they stop and listen for 5 minutes with the windows down, and for the 3 time periods, you see why they're broken down. Basically, you get the March and April ones, then the May, June, and then the June and July time periods. We also have to break it down by area of the state. The northern routes are run quite a bit later, and it's actually surprising how late sometimes we have to have the Duluth people running out there, because I figure 2-3 weeks after we start, we can let them know, and we still have a lot of snow, so I've had to delay their routes several times because of it. The surveyors, it's not individuals, and they're not counting the actual frogs. They're listening to those calls, and so they'll listen, and it's a chorus. So it's not like the individuals that I had just played for you guys. They'll try to listen to the individuals, and they'll count either if it's like calling once every once in a while, or if it's just full-blown chorus and you can't hear anything in between. And so they just mark them by 1, 0, 1, 2, 3 on what they're finding. So it's more of a presence and absence type survey. The volunteers, to keep the survey, make sure they're accurate, they have to take the frog and total quiz, and we let them take it as many times as they need to until they pass, and sometimes a lot of people need to. And like I said, as far as the population trends, this needs to be updated because we finally got some of the extra data in here, but they're remaining relatively steady. Some of the species, like the gray tree frog and the spring peeper, had slight declines. But overall, most of the species in Minnesota, we're not losing them. The only times they're being removed from the routes is more that the routes are becoming overrun by the urban population. And so part of what I would like to do as to progress the survey would be to get some sort of backyard frog and toad survey, because the routes are great because they give us the randomness that you need in a survey, but they're not everywhere. And with the number, I had thousands, literally, of people calling me wanting to run the routes in the spring, and so I think if we maybe broadened it out to allow some of the people with the backyard, we could have a little bit better presence and absence survey. And so that's something we're working on within the next couple of years, is adding that as well as this more regimented survey mode. Did anyone have any questions?
How do you found the Kipper fungus that
What's that?
Have you found the Kipper fungus yet in this?
No, I don't think, other than the issues we had with the mutations earlier on, and that they're not funding it anymore, and the consensus seems to be that it was because of dragonfly nymphs in the water eating off the little wing buds, and then when they grew back up, they grew wrong. And so apparently that was what the general, I mean, it's not 100% and nobody's definitively said that's what it was, but I guess that's why we stopped funding it, so.
Pesticides were ruled out?
What's that?
Pesticides were ruled out in that?
Basically, yeah. I mean, well, not technically, but that's from the literature that I've read. More of the consensus is it was because of those dragonfly nymphs in the water, chewing on it, making it appear more of a mutation than it was. And apparently it was like, I guess, a high year or something like that. And so it just, that's why so many were seen at that time, and so ebbs and flows. But on the national scale, they do have a reporting form, so if you see little mutant frogs running around, they do want you reporting them just so we can track it. But in the state, we're not tracking them.
Do you think that you would include that within the backyard survey?
Yeah, there are several criteria, because it would be, I kind of polled some of the people that were working either on plain stuff or wetlands or frogs and toads themselves and that sort of thing, on what they would want to see. And so, because it would give us a broader range, especially, I don't know, but in the southwestern corner, so many people live in residential areas. I have, in the Twin Cities, people will travel 3 hours for me to do some of these routes. In the southwestern corner, there's nothing fun to go visit, and there are people, but they don't travel to do a survey. I mean, they tell me, oh, I can listen to them outside my back door. And so those routes are the most underrepresented routes that we have. And so that southwestern corner, we don't really even have good data through this. And that's another reason why I thought maybe a backyard survey would help with some of that presence absence information. Sure.
Have bullfrogs been present in southeastern Minnesota for a long time, or is this?
That's their only real range, is the southeastern. The other dots were where people have moved them, and so they're invasive in most parts of Minnesota, even though they're relatively common. A lot of people are surprised that they're an invasive species in the state, but really they're only supposed to be in the southeast corner. They're just a tough problem.
Do they know why they were there? Is it just temperatures, or there's a lot of full water fisheries down there?
I'm not sure on why they were only, because they obviously survive well all over the place. So I'm not sure why that was the only real range. But when they do come in, they really do like to take over. And like I said, they get the other frogs and birds and mammals even whenever they want. So they're pretty wicked. Did anyone else have anything?
One more question, this is probably off this topic, but has there been any development regulation on bait use for divers for salamanders? We've got a cabin on North Park Rapids, Park Rapids bait stores. Every August, they get hundreds of tiger salamanders into the bait stores that are sold by local people who work after it in the wild. And then they just get an unbelievable number of tiger salamanders. I can't believe that harvest is regulated, because those numbers have been dropping so fast.
Well, they do, I can't speak for sure on salamanders, but I'm sure they do, because I know they regulate the frogs and toads for the bait ships. And so I would have to imagine they would need permits for the salamanders. But obviously, we work in the main central office to permit this stuff, and so we're counting on the conservation officers or the public to let us know, if we really see some sort of issue going on. We're not out there for a little bit.
Park Rapids, so in August, full of
Another question, cricket frog, work in the city of Bloomington here, and then come into a situation where we encountered it in a project. How do we know where they may be occurring, or is there a way to find out information where they've been heard? This was like down near the Minnesota River that we had found.
Our website does list, if you go into, just type in frog and toads, and you will find little maps of where they should be occurring.
Okay.
And then if you're on like a job site in a known area, best way is to listen to the frog calls to find out if they're in the area. Obviously, though, that's only seasonally, you can figure that out. Otherwise, you know, you might have to do some sort of trapping or that sort of thing to confirm that they're there. But frog calls would be a way if it's a long-term project that you have that extra season.
So there is
for
some
that.
mapping available to look for.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So it could be tied into a Google Earth or something like this. Start to see patterns.
Well,
For instance, the backyard survey.
the backyard survey, yeah, we do have certain databases, and obviously they're becoming more GIS oriented, and we do have the natural heritage data, and there's a big push within the agency itself to, you know, we had pockets of data here, here, and here, and then sometimes they overlap, and so there's a big push to gather all of that data into one central source, which would then, you know, help in some of these public, allowing the public to see that. For the frog and toad survey in particular, that's on the USGS site. If you ever want the data for that, you would go to the NAAMP, and just type that in as a search term, and it'll come to that survey, and you can get the data from years back. And although apparently USGS may be dumping the program because of funding issues, so we're kind of waiting to see on that. But if they did, we would pull it internally into Minnesota, and we would still keep the program going, whether they're participating or not.
If somebody went on the web, could they find all the calls so they could kind of train themselves?
On the USGS site, they are on there, yeah. If you actually like need it for some sort of job related or something that you want to start listening to, I do for all of my volunteers. They get the poster, which I have a bunch of them back there, and then there's the frog and toad calling disc, and this one's great. This is put out by the Hamlet University, and so, but they charge like $15 if you come off the street, and so we're trying to put a bunch of MP3s on, rather than us having to purchase this through Hamlin every year, our own collection of MP3s so that our volunteers can take their smartphones out and verify themselves when they're out in the field. Anyone else? Thank you.
Hear that? That's the sound of what nights ago. Not here later. So anyway, I'm going to talk about shoreline restoration, and it's going to cover still water and moving water, so streams as well as lakes, ponds, and wetlands. And typically these have all been associated with water quality projects, so a lot of the funding has come from watershed districts or water soil resources. And I have most of them I'm going to show you are in the metro area. And I'm going to show you the project at the tour, and I'm going to talk about sort of some things that got us there. And if you have any questions, go ahead and ask me while I'm talking. It's just fun. So that's us, Kestrel, and thank goodness I don't have the same suit on. In any case, that's our team. Some have background in botany, biology, and geography, and we kind of do this hybrid green infrastructure between storm water issues and green issues. So look up this slide. This is between 1994 and 2012. The Chain of Lakes, various kinds of initiatives were undertaken within Minneapolis, including mainly the Hartford Watershed District, but it also included Mississippi Watershed Management Organization. It also included Bassett Creek and some of the others as well. So they were all partners in this. And the park board was part of the deal. and the city. And when it was in the western suburbs, St. Louis Park was in this, and Ridgefield, or St. Louis Park and Hopkins, excuse me, they were involved in it as well. So I'm going to kind of take you through this watershed area on the projects that we did. So I'll set, at one point I'm going to show you the headwaters where we did some treatment there. I'm going to try and make it as cohesive as possible, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is that it takes a while to get these things established. And our first project in Minnesota, so I was doing this in Chicago from the mid-'80s, and my first project in Minnesota was 1994, 95, and there had been a project that had been done in which like 25,000 wetland plants had been installed, and they were all eaten out over the course of a weekend. And so it seemed, I mean, we had been doing it for years in Chicago because there was a lot of restoration was really active there, and it was basically herbivore exclusion fences and stuff like that. So it's amazing how far it's come, and it's almost become, in terms of installation, not installation, more in professional services, almost become a commodity. So we don't do as much of it here as we used to. We do it in other places where it's not a commodity. So there's that issue too with, and I'm sure you all face that with delineated wetlands too, it's been kind of commodified. So I'm going to show you, so this one up here is Lake Harriet, southwest corner. This is Minnehaha Creek. This is down by Lake Nokomis. This is in Marcy Holmes, so this is part of the Mississippi Watershed Management Organization. So it's right on the north side of Mississippi. This is Phillips Eco Enterprise Center in Minneapolis. This is Lake Nokomis stormwater treatment ponds, and there's others as well. But this is Minnehaha Creek, so I'm going to show you this one first. So moving water, and in the springtime, when the Grays Bay Dam is open and there's a lot of precipitation, May, June, July is when it flows the highest. We have a kind of like a, you've heard the phrase bank full condition. Essentially, it's the Roskin defines it as the event that forms the stream, the geometry of the stream. And it's not the giant floods, it's these bank full events which happen about 2 out of 3 years. Now, I'm going to use this. You may have various opinions about Roskin, it seems like everybody does, but whether you think he's right or wrong, I just use it because the DNR here in the state uses it, and they've used his work out in the western part of the state in restoration and soil bioengineering, etc. And so I've done the training with them, and I have a lot of faith in what they've done. But for the west, the far west, some of the techniques don't seem to apply out there. But here in the Midwest, we've got constant precipitation. We don't have intermittent streams so much. It seems to work. So this you can tell is kind of like that bank full condition. As always, the outside end, that's where it moves fastest. This is the beginning of a bridge abutment over here. And so here's the armoring on this outside cut. On the inside cut, this is the point bar. So we want to try and get access out here. So cutting this down is a part of that as well, so that the flood can access that part of the floodplain. So it's not just, the river in a sense is not just the channel. The river is the channel and its floodplain. That's the river. And we've treated rivers as basically the channel. It's more than that. So these are mainly a combination of red osier dogwood, gray dogwood, elderberry, sandbar willow. There's some cultivar willows in there in terms of bankers and streamco, which are somewhat shorter bankers in particular. And this is right alongside, you can kind of see this is the same shot right here, same location, same houses. And there are other stream professionals that say, you know what, we should just let the streams do their own thing. They should cut their own channel, and we should just let it be. And I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to be the guy that was going over there and telling them, don't worry about a thing. It's gonna take out the road, your front yard, maybe it'll take out your house. We're letting the stream do its thing. So, so that wasn't an option here, and I'm sure that you'll probably find the same thing. This is a sketch that we did kind of to convey an idea. This being the point bar side, and this is the higher energy side, the cut bank side. And maybe that could be cut a little sharper here. And anyways, so these are the live stakes put in, and they're like this. So these live stakes are harvested in November through April. The best time to put them in seems to be in the beginning of the season, rather than the end of the season. There's something about the amount of carbon that seems to be in it that do better. And these species all have this, phreatophytes have this adventitious rooting capability on their stems, particularly on their nodes. So they basically spread out mechanically. They mechanically hold the soil, and they also basically pull the moisture out of the soil in the process of evapotranspiration. So it's this mechanical device, and typically what's happening is that all of the vegetation with larger roots is gone, and so this gets cut down because the stream has more in it than it used to, more water, and then this gets wet and it gets heavy, it collapses, and the stream continues to head cut down, and then the banks collapse in. So you've seen this in urban streams. So the idea is the stream, say, is 5 pounds capacity, but a lot of streams will be given 9 or 10 pounds, and that's why they continue to head cut. And this is a way to try and stabilize the bed, but not all the way through the bed, just in spots, like rock veins and those kinds of things. We should also add that on this project, Minnehaha Creek one, the engineering firm on that was Westwood, and Bruce, what's his name, was the engineer on it. Yeah, and he passed away. But anyways, my favorite thing that he said was, we were writing out the specs for it, and he said, I don't care if they take the guy with the pointiest head and stick him in the ground to make the holes for the pilot holes for the stakes. All you got to do is tell them that it has to show up like this at the end. You don't have to tell them how. So, anyways, it's very memorable. So here's that environment. This is the same deal. These are pillows, basically, a combination of geogrid and burlap that have been folded in like this in these pillows. I'll show you detail of them in a minute. So this is a higher energy environment. This can get up to 8 feet per second. At 5 feet per second and 6 inches of water, I wouldn't be able to stand up. So I'd be like a large piece of woody debris going down the street. So that's high energy. This is for a low energy environment. So this is something where it's a wetland or shore, and maybe it can hold up to 1 to 2 feet, 200 feet per second. So it's lower energy environment. This is coir, coconut coir. It's a product that lots of manufacturers make. And this is a floating boom, and essentially when the work was being done here, it wasn't possible to put a silt fence there. So this is the way to keep, when the sediment got in there, it was basically scooped out and side cast. So you're looking at, this is a coconut blanket. So this image is a close-up of what that looked like a minute ago. So here's the pillows. So here's the bed, and in this case, there's also a vein coming out here every so often. So this is the way, what the vein does is it centers the energy more towards the center of the stream and away from the bank. So the highest point of energy is not right at the bank, it's maybe 3 to 5 feet off of that. And these are the pillows, and they're backfilled with, this is the borrow that was on site, so typical soil borrow. And the road is literally, right up here. You can kind of see the fence. So the parkway is and the trail, bike trail, are right on the other side of that. So like I said, I wouldn't want to be the guy that was saying, we're going to let the stream form its own bed. And, sorry about that. Here's another thing that we worked on. We worked on this with, we put this team together. So Ron Bowen, Prairie Restorations, Wade from Prairie Moons on it, and Sue Galadowicz, and we basically came up with a seed manual that's all the major agencies have adopted now. And it started as a road manual, but became a kind of a bigger deal. And so we have two kinds of things in the seed manual. We have dominance, and then we have these other suite of species or associates that go with it. The big idea was that as opposed to the prescriptive mixes of the past, you know, if you're going to do this, this is the mix you use, is that we allow, there's substitutions that are allowed in this. So there's like, okay, if it's pen sedge or wood sedge or some other sedge, that would work. So you don't have to, so we don't know, everybody's not chasing down the last two ounces of Pennsylvania sedge in the state. So we're kind of proud of this. And we're going to get a grant to turn this into an electronic thing so you can just plug and play. That being the idea. And the idea was is we wanted it written so that county engineers would start to do this, that they could fill it out. And just all they had to do was plug in the things, the variables on their spreadsheet. And some of them have. And what we've managed to do is that we wanted to bring the price per pound of seed down. So if you're allowed to, we had Ron, because they have a seed company, and so does Prairie Moon. We had them run scenarios like, okay, what if we do this, this, and this? What will we get? And some of the mixes, and they were solid mixes, were about 250 pounds, about $250 per acre as seed. That's a good deal. I mean, that's a really good deal. Some of them went as high as 700, but generally we were able to bring the price way down because we allow this substitution process. And essentially the dominants are the ones that, kind of like the shock troops, they're the ones that kind of hold the things together, and then these other associates are to fill out the suite of species. So this is Lake Nokomis, and this is Nokomis Park, and this park is a lake. There's the lake over there, and then this was all grass turf areas, and over here is the bike and pedestrian trails, and then there's the parkway over here. So the thing that's something significant about this is that the lake was once 300 acres in size. So the lake extended all the way to where the parkway is right now. And then what happened is Theodore Wirth in 1918, 1919 decided, I want to make a lake, a true lake. I don't want to have a type 1 wetland, you can call it that, but I want to have a lake. So they made the lake 200 acres, and all the material they took out of it was side cast over here. So this is 100 acres of fill, and it's a lake mucks. And if you drive over here, and you're on the parkway, you'll see that the trail and the sidewalk are high, as is the parkway. And then the land in between is like this. It's basically evaporated, that material. This was late in the spring before the project went in. And so you can see this stuff is smartweed, some cattails, and water plantain were occurring in here. Then they would mow it off. And the water they had the soil conditions for wetland, they had the vegetation, and then they also had the hydrology. And we were very lucky. Nancy Reed from Mosquito Control did a survey of all these different areas around lakes and wetlands, because she's constantly being challenged. Oh, you're going to do that, it's just going to be mosquito breeding deal, and it will be dangerous. And this was right around West Nile virus times, a little before that. So anyway, she surveyed this, and she found that these mowed areas, because there was no toads and frogs there to eat the larvae, and there was no fish in there, that if you wanted to design an area that was really, really good at breeding mosquitoes, especially the Culex genus, which is the carrier of the West Nile virus, you couldn't have come up with a better one than this. So it was very helpful to have that information, because it's like, okay, what we have right now, you may think it's safe, but it's actually not safe. There's West Nile virus concentrations over here are very, very high because of this kind of super breeding areas. So the wetlands were put in these locations, and they vary in size from the smallest ones from about 3 acres. The biggest one is up about 14 acres. And these are only for treatment. So they're not for volume. The lake, the 200-acre sheet of water out there, that's for volume. So all of the upper watershed comes to these in pipes. There's grit chambers up in the watersheds now. There's about 350 acres for the biggest wetland and about 150 for this wetland in terms of the urban watershed that's running off into it. So it comes in pipes and comes in underwater. In this one, as an example, this is called Nokomis Nose. Here and here, there's a pipe coming in there. And if you were to do a cross section, you saw the pipes coming in here and here, you would see there's a cutaway. And then you'll see this embankment that's not quite up to the top of the water surface and ordinary water level. And then it goes back down again. It does the same thing over here. Those things are basically energy dissipators to drop the grit out of it so that we could concentrate the sediment in one location. So every 5 years, and it's been done a couple of times in these ponds, is they can come in, scoop out that material, and move on. It isn't spread over the entire pond. So that was the idea, and it seems to have worked fairly well. And then we would reinforce these areas here with, there's a product, it's about the size of a baseball card, and I can't remember, Netlon. And it's incorporated into the soil, and it essentially acts as structure. You can put a fully loaded fire truck on this, and it won't sink. So we wanted to have it be able to, you could bring in dump trucks, you could bring in backhoes, you could dig it out, and then it won't go away, and it looks the same as before. It reseeded, or it'll come back in the sun. You can sign a cardinal flowers and brown-eyed Susans. Got a little bit of horsetail here. These are big, large arrowheads. There's some green bulrush over here. That's about 2 years in. Same sort of a picture. So these are mainly burreeds over here, and river bulrush. Blue vervain, brown-eyed Susans, cardinal flower. These projects were all done. There was the owner, we had the owner buy the plants in the contract to grow. And I don't know, it's up to you entirely, but we have found that to be a very effective way to get the plants we need, plants we expect. And when they get delivered there, they all kind of look the same. They're about the same size and condition and all those things. So they would be delivered in batches. And I think our total number of plants for all of the wetlands was maybe 80,000 plants, 85,000 plants, and then there was seeding as well, which was done in the upland areas. So this is Lake Harriet, and there's a big grit chamber underneath here. There's a little lookout area here. This is the southwest corner, and this grit chamber is the old style one, basically like a big shoebox with things sticking down and sticking out, as opposed to the vortex style, which are over in the Nokomis. And it gets cleaned out. The sediment gets cleaned out, but this thing is really big. It's big, certainly as big as a trailer, a box on a trailer. It's underground. So this captures all of this hard sediment, but doesn't capture it all. A lot of it gets discharged right up here. It used to form this like big delta. So we got permission from the watershed district to create these islands from that material, so we could create that kind of like in-lake dissipation, energy dissipation. If you look at pictures of this before it went in the summertime, you can see the sediment plume way out in the lake, almost halfway across. And now the sediment plume isn't nearly as much. They need to keep this thing cleaned up. So they got to clean the box, and again, they got to clean this out. But they can reach it with a long-armed backhoe, and then the trucks on the parkway, they can do it in a constrained way, and we're focused on keeping that material in one location. That's a micron heron right there. So these are some sedges here. I'm sorry, they're not coming to mind which ones they are. Some of the planting that's going on here, and in the foreground there's hardstem bulrush, arrowheads. You can see the planting going on here. Generally, they're planted about 1 every foot, 1 every 2 square feet, kind of as an average. This is another one, and this is gathering spaces. Each one of these had like this, we call it council ring. This fellow named Jens Jensen came up with. Basically, it's a bunch of sitting rocks. And the idea was is that the schools could come here, bring in class, sit down, and talk about the thing. And then it was a bunch, some of those areas had plants labeled. This is, I'm going to actually skip up a little bit because I jumped around. How did I get it out? Sorry. Okay. So this is part of Minnehaha Creek Wetland.